I will continue a story about users and privileges in Monet database. I will now log in as administrator. My password is MonetDB. And the first thing is that I will delete users from the previous video. So I will delete users from the video part 1. I will delete new user, and I will also delete user Eminem. After that, I will create 3 new users. I will first create a user. So this will be a user with this name, and I will not define his default schema. That means that a new schema with the same name as this user will be created. And similar to this, I will create B user, and I will create C user. And each of them will have his own schema. After that, I will clear my screen, and then I will jump to this other tab. Inside of this other tab, I will log in as a user. My password is just a number 1, so I will type 1 and then enter. And then I will create a table inside of the schema of this user. So this user here has a schema with this name, and inside of it I will create a table. This table will have 2 columns, and this first column will have a primary key constraint. So I will create this table. I will insert 1 row inside of this table, and then I will read from this table just to see how this table looks like. So this is a table. It has this letter A here, and beside that I will create 1 function with the name A function, and this function will also be created inside of the A user schema. So I will create this function. After this, I will clear my screen, and then I will jump to this 3rd tab, and here I will log in as a B user. So now I am B user. B user also has a password that is number 1. So I will type 1 and then enter, and then I will create 1 table inside of the schema of this user. So inside of the B user schema, I will create B table with again 2 columns. I will insert 1 row inside of this table, and then I will read from this table just so we can see how this table looks like. And we can see that this B table has a letter B, while table A has a letter A. I will now clear my screen. I will now jump to this web page, and here we will see our current status. We have 3 users. We have A user, B user, and C user. A user has a table and a function, A function. B user has a table, B table, and C user doesn't have anything. And we also have our admin. I will now go back. I will continue being B user, and I will try to read from A table. But this table, as we know, belongs to A user. So if I try to execute this statement, I will be denied. So what we need to do now is to grant privileges to B user. For that, we have to be A user. So I will jump back, and now I will grant those privileges. So I will use a grant all statement. Now this statement will grant all rights on this table to B user. This here is default. This means that the authority that is granting this right is A user, because A user is current user. The other option that we can use here is to say from current role, but we will see later an example for that. I will now execute this statement, and now B user has right to read from A table, and we will test that. We will go back here to be a B user, and again I will try to read from A table, and now I will succeed because now I have granted privileges to B user. Next, I will now try to change something inside of this A table. Although I am B user, so I will try to alter this table and to rename its column. I will run this, but I will fail. This is because altering of table is only allowed to the owner of a table. An owner of a table is a person who owns a schema where that table is. So B user cannot alter this table. I will clear here my screen, and then I will jump again to this A user tab, and here I will revoke these rights. So I will say that B user can no more use a table, and I can do that like this. I will say revoke all privileges on table A table from B user. So I will revoke all privileges, and now B user can no more use this table. I will again clear my screen. We have saw how to grant all of the privileges on one table to a user. But we do not have to give all of the privileges, we can give them partially. So I will use this statement as a user. I will grant only select, insert, and update privileges on a table to B user. We can also grant privileges on delete, truncate, and reference. Besides that, we can be even more specific. For example, I can say that user B can do select, but only on a number column. And he can only do update on a number and a letter column. And we can also use this limit on only some columns with reference. So I will just give him a partial rights. So I will run this, and then I will jump being a B user. So we will go to this B user tab, and I will try to read from a table. But I will only see now one column, because if we go back to this A tab, we will see that only select from this first column is allowed. So we will not see other column, although we have used select star. If we try to read from the both columns, if I specify both of them, then I will be denied because this other column cannot be read by B user. I can also try to delete everything inside of this A table, although I don't have a privilege, so if I try this, I will be denied. I will now go back to being a user, and I will now try to revoke these privileges. I will try to run a statement, revoke all. So this is how we can revoke all of the privileges on table A table. And I will run this, and beside this I will try to revoke select on a table, but not just select of this column, but select in general for all of the columns. So I will also run this, and then I will go again to be a B user, and now I will check whether my privileges are revoked. So I will try to read from this table, and I will succeed. And this is because I will now go back to being a user. We have granted these privileges, so we have to revoke the same privileges. So this privilege here is not included inside of this privilege, and it is also not included inside of this privilege. This privilege here, this privilege here, and this privilege here are three different privileges. So we have to run revoke statement that is the same as this one grant statement. I will do that now. So I will revoke these specific privileges. So now I will use the same syntax. So select from the column, insert, update from two columns. So everything will be the same. I will run this, and this will be successful. I will clear my screen here, but I will jump back to being a B user because I want again to test whether now my privileges were revoked. So I will again try to read from a table, and now I will be denied because that was a correct way to revoke my privileges. I will clean my screen here. Currently, B user doesn't have any privileges on a table. So if I try to run a statement like this one, this should fail. This is a statement that will try to create a foreign key relation between B table and A table. And this should fail because B user shouldn't be able to do this. Now remember that on A table we have placed a primary key constraint, and the only reason I have placed primary key constraint is in order to make this statement work. I will now run this, and I'm expecting to be denied, but I will be successful. And this is working, this is really working, and this is a bug in Monet database. This shouldn't be allowed, so user B shouldn't be able to reference tables of other users, but for some reason, for some bug, this is allowed, so we don't have to do a grant and revoke of reference privilege, because that privilege is allowed to everyone. I will now clean my screen. We will now go again to this tab for A user, and now I will grant a privilege to B user to execute A function. So I will run this statement, grant execute on function A user A function to B user. I will run this, and now I will go again being a B user, because I want to test whether B user can really use this function, and B user is allowed to use this function. I will clear here my screen, and then I will go back again to being an A user, because I want now to revoke this privilege. So I will use revoke execute on function A function from B user. And again, I will clean my screen. And I want to tell you that this statement, they do work on functions, but if we want to do the same with procedures, then I will jump to this web page. We should use the similar statements, just instead of execute on function, we have to use execute on procedure. So instead of execute on function, we use execute on procedure. I will go back. I will again jump to this web page, and I will click on this link here. So I will open one other blog post, and here I want to remind you that a user can use Python code to work with CSV files on his own computer, on client computer, and he can upload and download those files to and from Monet server. And this is always allowed. But I will go back to terminal. I will go to this administrator tab. I'm going here because only administrator can work with CSV files on the server. And I will now show you how he can grant those rights to some user. So we will grant copy int and copy from privileges to a user. And now a user can work with CSV files on the server. Currently I'm a user, so I will run a statement that will export data from a table to CSV file on the server. I will run this, and this is successful. I will now clear my screen, and then I will jump to desktop, and here we can see that file that was exported. We can read from it, and we can confirm that this is a table. I will close this file and I will delete it. Then I will go back. I will go back to admin tab, and I will now revoke this right. So I will use revoke from a user, and now we have revoked his rights. I will now clear my screen. I want to tell you that there is a special role with the name public. So we can grant some privilege to this role to public. So I will grant select on a table to public. And if we grant any privilege to this role, then that privilege will be available to all of the users. I will now jump to this last tab, and here I will log in as a C user. My password is number 1. I will click enter, and then I will try to read from this A table, and I will be successful because this privilege is available to everyone. I will clear my screen here. I will go back to administrators tab, and I will revoke this privilege. I will revoke it, and I will clean this screen too. Now we will talk about grantable rights. We can grant privilege to read from a table to B user. And I'm giving this privilege as admin, and I will also use this clause with grant option. This means that B user will be able to read from this table, but he will also be able to grant this privilege further. So he will be able to give the same privilege to some other user. So I will run this, and then I will jump being a B user. So we will go to this tab here, and I will try to read from this A table, and I will be successful. But beside this, we can give this right to some other user. As a B user, I will give right to read from A table to C user. So now B user also has right to give this right to C user, because that right was given to him thanks to this clause with grant option. So I will run this, and now the C user has a right to read from this table too. Before I continue with this example, I will jump to this web page and I will give you a visual representation of everything that we will do in this example, because this example is a little bit long. So we have started with that we gave rights to B user, and we gave that rights not as a user but as administrator. It doesn't matter. So we gave rights, both select right and grant right, to B user. And then B user gave both of those rights to C user. Now C user has both rights, but then A user revoked those rights from the B user. After this, rights on the C user will still belong to C user, and C user can now grant those rights to VOC user. After that, I want to delete all of these rights, so we can first delete rights from the VOC user as a C user. So C user will revoke rights from the VOC user, but then who can remove rights from the C user? That can be done only by administrator or A user. B user who gave rights, so in this step, B user gave rights to C user, has no more these rights, so he's now without rights. So B user cannot remove rights from the C user. Rights have to be removed by the administrator or by A user. We will now go back, and I will now do that next step. I will remove rights from the B user. Again, I will jump to being A user, and I will remove rights from the B user. So alter rights were given by the administrator. I can remove them as A user because A user owns this table. But now C user still has those rights. B user doesn't have rights, but C user has. So now C user can still read from this table, and he can also grant these rights further. So he can now grant rights to VOC user. So this time we are in this step, we are granting as a C user rights to VOC user. B user has lost his own rights. If he tried to grant these rights to someone else, we will see that he is not able to do that because his privileges are removed. And now we have rights on C user and VOC user. Now I want to remove these rights. So first, as a C user, I will remove rights from the VOC user. And for that, we will use this statement here. So we will be now C user. We will remove rights from the VOC user. And after that, we now have to remove rights from the C user. I will here clear my screen, and then I will try to remove those rights as a B user. But B user doesn't have any more rights here. We can see that here. So he cannot remove rights from the C user. We can test that. So I will run this revoke statement as a B user, and I will fail. I will also now clean my screen. So the only two persons who can remove rights from the C users are A user or admin. So I will go back. I will choose this A user tab, and I will revoke rights from the C user. I will also clean my screen, and I will clean my screen as admin. And we have saw how to give grantable rights. I want to tell you that this is a little bit confusing, so we should avoid giving these grantable rights because at the end things can get chaotic. I will go back. Until now we have talked about how to give privileges to a user. But now we will give privileges to a role. So as administrator, I will first create one role, and then I will grant one privilege to this role. Now we can grant many privileges to the same role. So role is collection of privileges, and then when we create such role with a lot of privileges, we can grant that role to a user, and then user will inherit all of those privileges. And this is how we can grant the role to a user. I will now clean my screen here, and then I will jump to this B user tab, and here I will now try to read from this A table, because that privilege is included inside of the role 1. But this will fail. And this will fail because currently our user has his own default role, and that is the role B user. And instead of that, we will now set another role. We will now take the role 1. That role was granted to us, but we have to take it explicitly because at one moment we only can take one role. So I will take this role, and only now I will be able to read from the A table. And now this is successful. I will clean my screen. We only have one administrator. I will jump to this first tab, and that administrator is MonetDB. But I want to create another administrator, and I can do that by using sysadmin. Sysadmin is a predefined role, and I will use that role to give administrators powers to C user. So I will grant sysadmin role, and then I will jump to this tab for the C user. Here I will now try to create a new user because only admin can create a new user, but I will of course fail because like each time we first have to set role sysadmin, that is we have to take the role and only then we can use the powers of that role. So I will now try again to create a new user, and we will see that now we are successful. Next, I will try to create a role. But when we use a statement like this one, we are using default mode. And default mode is with admin current user. So this is default mode. But who is current user? Current user is C user, and C user will not be able to create a new role. I will try it, but it will fail. Instead of that, we have to use power of the role of the sysadmin. So I will create a statement like this one. We are now using with admin current role. So this is the difference between with admin current user and with admin current role. If we take current role as an authority to create a role, then we will succeed, and this will work. I will now clean my screen here, and then I will go back being an admin. That is, I will go back to MonetDB tab, and here I will read from some system tables. I will read from system table sys user role, and I will also read from system table sys.odds. And here we will see what happened. First, we can see that this user has this role. So who is this user? We can see that here, this is C user. So C user has this role, and this role is sysadmin role. And then we will take a look at D user. Who have created this D user? Well, D user was created by C user. So C user created D user, but the role ZZZ was not created by the C user. Instead of that, it is created by sysadmin. So this is how things work in Monet. I will now clean my screen. I will now again go to this tab with C user, and I will now grant role ZZZ to A user. I will run this, and this will fail. This will fail because we again have to use powers of the current role. So we need to run a statement like this. We will grant role, but we will use authority of the sysadmin role. So I will run this, and now this is successful. This is how we can give someone privilege to use some role. But I want to give grantable privilege. So I want to give to a user a right to give this role further, to give this role to some other user. And to achieve that, I will first revoke this privilege that I gave him. So I will revoke ZZZ role from a user. And then I will give him this right again, but this time I will use with admin option. So with admin option means that we will give a grantable right to a user. So I will run this, and then I will clean my screen. I will then jump to being a user, and here I will first take my new role. So I will set role ZZZ, and after that I will try to grant this role to be used. And because now I have a grantable right, I'm able to do this, and this will be successful. I will now clean my screen. We will now see how to create a hierarchy of roles. I will become an admin. So we are going to this admin tab. In here, I will create two roles. I will create parent role, and I will also create child role. And then I will grant all of the privileges from the child role to parent role. We can do that with this statement. We will grant child role to parent role, and we will always use with admin option. We will see later why is this important. So I will do this, and beside that I will give one privilege to child role just so we can later test our results. So I will grant select on B table to child role. Next, I will now grant just one of these roles to C user. So I will grant parent role to C user. I will not grant child role, only parent role. And now I will clean my screen. Next, I will jump here to C user tab, and I will try to use both roles. Now, because only one role was directly granted to us, we can then set that role, and that role is parent role. But including in parent role, we have ability to grant usage of the child role. So we will use that ability, that power. So we will grant child role to ourselves. This role gave us a power to give this role to anyone, and we will use that power to give this role to ourselves. And we will use the power of the current role. So I will run this, and now we can set also the other role. And this is why that with admin option was important. With admin options, we wouldn't be able to take the child role to grant it to ourselves. I will now take the child role, and now we can try to read from B table. And we are successful. So now we have rights from the both roles, both from the parent role and from the child role. I will now clean my screen. At the end, let's take a look at some system tables. I will first read from the system table sys.privilege codes. I will only take the first 20 rows, and here we will find the list of all possible combinations of separate privileges that can be given on one table. Here we will remember that select privilege has an ID of 1. Next, we will read from the system table sys.tables, and we will search here for B table. The only reason why I'm doing this is because I want to find out an ID of this table. Next, we will read from the system table sys.privileges, and here all of the given privileges are listed. I will only search for privileges that are given on our B table. So this ID here is this ID here. So these are privileges that are given on B table. Besides that, I will also read from sysauth table, and here we will find all of our users and roles. And now we are ready to analyze this sys.privileges table. Here first we will see that our privilege is marked with number 1. This is select privilege. We saw previously inside of that table with quotes that one is ID of select privilege. This privilege was given on B table because B table has this ID, and that privilege was given to role with this number. We can see that here. This number here is equal to this number here, so this privilege was given to child role. Who gave this privilege? Well, someone with ID of 3, and that would be administrator. And is this privilege grantable? Well, 0 means that it isn't, and 1 would mean that it is.